Joseph, the Big 12 football schedule finally came out last week as we all waited with bated breath. Houston gets Texas at home. We had Chris Pesman on that day on our show talking about it, just how excited they were, especially that was kind of the game that Houston had to get of the, whenever Texas know you do leave, they had to get that home game against the Longhorns. How did you feel the schedule shook out for the Cougars, especially that one at home against the Horns?
Well, if you factor in their non-conference schedule, it's not bad when you don't leave the state but twice the entire season. I believe it's the first 6 games. They don't even, leave the city or close to it. So I thought it was for first year Big 12. It's what they wanted. I was a little surprised that they're going back to Lubbock 2 straight years, but I'm sure that was one of the concessions that were made in terms of who you got on the schedule and how and where you would play. But no, TCU was an interesting get because there just happened to be that opening there. And Houston talked with TCU officials and said, hey, let's try to make this work. And they did. But you're right, the Texas game, it'll be the biggest home game they've ever had at the existing place and at least the biggest in at least 2 decades. And, Chris Pesman told me a few weeks ago that they've, this is the type of game that if they moved it to like NRG and a neutral site game, they could make a lot of money off of it, but he wants to keep his job, so he's not going to move it. And really it would be counterproductive to finally get into the Big 12 and then start moving games to neutral sites. So that one's going to be packed. That one's going to be a huge crowd. And the fact that they, can drive fans-wise, can drive to Waco, and really even to Lubbock, you look at the schedule, it's really setting up nice. It's kind of going to be like the old Southwest Conference days.
Do you feel that game will be majority Houston fans, or do you think the Texas fans will get in early on that?
Well, I can tell you there will be no temporary bleachers set up at that game. But you know what? It's interesting because they're going to roll out season ticket information in about a week. I expect, that's going to be the huge selling point, and I'm not sure if how they're going to package that game. But the Houston fan base has wanted that game. It would be a appointment if you have a 40,000 seat stadium and a quarter of it or even more than that are burnt orange fans. So I would imagine Houston fans would gobble those up and stuff, but nothing surprises me down here in terms of how things shake out. But it certainly will be the hottest ticket of the year, and Texas will have its share of fans. Just knowing Houston as being as big of a Longhorn, alumni area as there is.
Joseph, what's kind of the temperature around Holgo right now and just kind of the feel surrounding the program? I noticed that the other day he was talking about the need for facilities, and he kind of made the comment of like, whether I'm here or not, he's just, talking about the future of what they need. But just sort of what's the temperature as the offseason now moves along after last year?
It's warm, but it's not, it's not sizzling. They feel like they've taken some steps since late last season to sort of maybe right the ship a little bit. He's Holgorsen, and he's gonna downplay a lot, or he's gonna speak his mind, and nothing he said wasn't true in terms of the facilities. They need certain things to happen. They're going to be one of the only ones in the Big 12. If not the only one without a football-only operations building. So from that regard, that's one part of it. And then recruiting. They've gotten some guys, some 4-star guys that normally wouldn't come here. So that's sort of been the Big 12 effect. But they're planning. Their business as usual, like it's long term. Now, if Houston struggles next year, it'll be interesting to see if the donor base led by Tillman Fertitta wants to make a move or not. And the indication we got last year was that Holgorsen would get at least 1 year in the Big 12, and they would reevaluate and see where things at. Because he just signed a long, multi-year extension last spring. So he's just going about everything. They feel like they're going to have to redo make over the roster, get the facilities on par, and then jump into this thing head first and see where it takes them.
He was really frustrated with the roster the team early in the season. They had a lot of, and we had you on during that time about all of that.
Right.
Do you feel that he's kind of come through that storm a little bit when it was, like he was, just calling people out in press conferences, the team's fighting on the sideline, like all those things that happened, they closed stronger than they started, obviously.
8 games, yeah.
Yeah, they closed stronger than they started. Right. So was that storm, it was loud, but was it temporary?
Yeah, they were probably DEFCON 1 after that Tulane game when really everything sort of seemed like it was falling apart. There were questions of whether he had lost the locker room, that kind of stuff. But the Memphis comeback in the fourth quarter when they were down big, that sort of re-energized them on offense. And they, other than the one slip up to Tulsa to end the regular season, they go and they win a bowl game, and they do all that without their star running back. So, if you have him healthy, maybe you're a 10-win team last year and competing for the conference title. But, yeah, the Holgorsen from late September to what ended the season, I think felt a lot better about the situation. He did make one staff change, not bringing back Brandon Jones, who was co-coordinator on offense and the run game offensive line coach. But other than that, he feels like, they can build off of that. He went out and he got the quarterback that he wanted in the transfer portal so they can replace Clayton Tune that way. He's gone out and surrounded the offense with a bunch of receivers in the offseason. So, they're trying to build off that momentum, where they need to make their biggest impact and strides is on the defensive side. And, that's sort of a work in progress, and we won't know much about that until we get into the spring for practice time.
Joseph Duarte, Craig, anything else?
Is Alton McCaskill, is he expected to be back for next season?
Yeah, he is. And in fact, the latest on his knee was that, he's good to go. They how those injuries go. Once they get him in the spring, see how that first hit, that kind of stuff. I'm sure he won't have much contact in the spring, but they feel like he's good to go. And whether the question was about potential leaving and stuff, we've got no indication. And Alton has basically said recently that he will be with the Cougars in 2023.
That's awesome. He was a lot of fun to watch, as you know, before he got hurt. So that's terrific news that he's coming back. And by the way, talking about the skid that went, it turns out Tulane was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was the
yeah, right. That was Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it turns out they were pretty good after all.
Yeah, he was probably like everybody panics like, oh my God, Tulane, and then all of a sudden they're one of the best teams in the country, and you look back and like, well, that was much ado about nothing. We should have probably just taken it on the chin. Well, Joseph, thanks a lot. Thanks for always hopping on when you do. Enjoy the run here for the Cougars. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon.
Hey, thanks for having me on the radio, guys. Appreciate it.
Joseph Duarte, Houston Chronicle with us here on 365 Sports. In the next hour, Brian Johannes